Welcome back and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. So, how do you go about making decisions? It may seem like an easy thing for many people to consider, but have you truly looked at the why or really the how of how you decide? What are the tools you use to make decisions? A lot of it is how you look back on what was wrong or what you considered a mistake. A look at how much time you spent deciding on something, what emotional choices you made, or whether fear is simply stopping you from moving forward. Annie Duke is the best-selling author, speaker, consultant, former professional poker player, World Series of Poker Tournament of Champions winner, runner-up on NBC's Celebrity Apprentice, a National Science Foundation Fellowship awardee, a nonprofit founder, and now she's the author of How to Decide, Simple Tools for Making Better Choices. And on this episode, we'll discuss decision-making, luck, poker, secrets, imagining success or failure, mental contrasting, tilting the machine with some emotional decisions, analysis by paralysis, fun facts about Norman Vincent Peale, ordering the chicken or the fish, Don Cheadle, Omaha, and a lot more. So let's tune in to a Duchess of Decision Strategy with the Duke of Shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Well, Annie, thank you so much for joining us today. This book, How to Decide, is fantastic. I was so glad to get a copy of it, and I'm holding it up, and you can't even see the damn thing on Zoom because I've got a virtual background, but you can tell I got it. So tell us a little bit about...
Did you try to wipe the eraser marks off the cover?
Yeah, I did. I literally, when I first got it, because everybody's in a coronavirus world, I took a Clorox wipe and put on it thinking that there was, you got to get the Rona off of it.
Yeah.
Then I didn't know it was an actual test, but it's fantastic because it makes you think. It's like Seth Godin, our friend who puts one of his books in a milk carton.
There you go.
It makes people kind of adopt a little bit closer to it. But why a book about decision making?
Oh gosh, that's actually because if you think about it, the way your life turns out, there's only two things that influence it. One is luck. You can't do anything about that. When I say luck, I mean, for example, like I had no control over when I was born.
From a former poker player.
Yeah. I had no control. Well, I mean, I can use a poker example, but I mean, in terms of my life, I didn't have any control over when I was born or who my parents were or how tall I was or what my innate talents might be or, any of those kinds of opportunities that kind of like, I could have been born in some other place besides America at the time that I was born. And, and then there's obviously all sorts of intervention, who do you meet and those kinds of things. So you have no control over the luck element. In poker, I don't have control over the cards that get dealt. Mm-hmm. So that the cards that get dealt doesn't determine, I don't have any control over that, but it's certainly going to determine my outcome, of a hand or a game or so on and so forth. But the other thing that has an influence over the way your life turns out, and it's the only other thing, is the quality of the decisions that you make. And that you do have quite a bit of control over. So I think about it's, your life is really luck plus decisions, and the luck you don't have any say over, but the decisions you do. And I don't think that we spend enough time as individuals really thinking in an intentional way about what is the quality of our decisions, what should we learn from past decisions that we've made and how they turn out, how can we make better decisions going forward? Because that's the only thing that's going to make your life better.
Well, obviously, I mean, this gets so many applications to it. I'm in the business and marketing world, but it sounds like you wrote this more from a life perspective point of view, if you will, rather than just a business point of view. I mean, they all work together, but is that fair to say?
So I actually was imagining this book in kind of two ways, that someone might pick it up to try to improve their own decision-making, but that this would be something that teams would use in order to kind of get on the same page about decision-making. Because that's the interesting thing about decision-making. It doesn't make a lot of sense to say, I'm going to teach you how to make business decisions. Because the underlying processes, the way that you're thinking about those should actually be the same. Now, obviously in business, people will say, yeah, but then you have teams and you have to think about what each individual goal is and so on and so forth. But that's no different than your life. I mean, team decision-making is the same as like, I have to make decisions with my husband. Mm-hmm. And we may have different ideas about how it might work out. And we got to sort of figure that stuff out and figure out how to align our goals and align our incentives and so on and so forth. So I don't really think about obviously my consulting work is all in business. I don't think about decisions as like business or personal. in that sense.
Well, then let's dive in a little bit to the book and go early. How do we get in front of the path to failure to increase our chances of success?
So, all right. So there's this whole big literature in the power of positive thinking, which is very, very popular, from Norman Vincent Peale, who, by the way, fun fact, officiated Donald Trump's first wedding.
Wow.
And then obviously, you know, there's Napoleon Hill and so on and so forth. So there's big literature in the power of positive thinking. And essentially, just to summarize, it's set a positive goal. By the way, I have no quibble with that. Set a positive goal and then imagine yourself succeeding along the way to that goal. Now, I want to say this is different than, it's different than visualization, right? So athletes will visualize, you know, successfully shooting a basket or something like that. That's different than this, although people tend to conflate them. But this is, you know, you imagine the goal that you'd like to achieve, and then you imagine successfully achieving it. Now, the thing about that is that implied in that literature is that if you imagine failing, that will create failure. Because what they're saying is you imagine a positive goal, you imagine yourself succeeding along the way, and this will create the success for you. And obviously, the obverse is implied. If you imagine failure, that will cause you to not achieve your goals. And I think that the most extreme version of this literature is a book called The Secret. Are you familiar with that book?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a big one, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was an Oprah book club thing. If I'm not mistaken, it sold like 20 million copies or something. So for people who are familiar with The Secret, if you own it, I don't recommend burning books, but also don't give it away to like Goodwill, because I wouldn't want anybody to actually read this book. Hide it somewhere in your attic for someone to excavate in the future.
Yeah, I didn't say I'd read it. I recognized the wax stamp on the cover. That's the extent.
Oh no, I didn't think you had read it. I didn't think you had read it. Yeah. No, I didn't think that. But there's lots of people who have, and it's interesting. I think that it's attractive. But anyway, basically what they say is we're not going to make it implicit anymore. That if you imagine failure, you'll fail. We're actually going to say, like, imagine the thing that you want in your life, and that will happen. And if you imagine failure, if you imagine bad things happening, that will also happen to you too. So they directly state a causal relationship between what you imagine and what actually happens. And they also actually say that they say they do some weird things. So they say it's like very specific. So like if I imagine that I'm in traffic in the morning, then I'll be in traffic the next morning. Which that one I always thought was weird. Like, what about the poor schmucks that are in the traffic with me? Like, did I just like imagine traffic for them, or did we all imagine? Was it collective? I don't know how you even resolve that. Or if I imagine like my paramour giving me a diamond ring, it will come. And the causal mechanism that they have for is that your brain waves have a magnetic quality to them. Now that's true in the sense of you can do an EMG, and if you put a sensor like right on the skull, you could see some magnetic activity, but certainly it's not going out into the universe, and it certainly can't distinguish between like diamond rings and elephants and whatever. It's a silly book. But I think that what's a couple of things are attractive about it. One is, that this idea of if I just imagine good things and that's what's going to get it for me, I think is pretty attractive, right? It doesn't require a whole lot of work. The problem, of course, is that you can't disprove anything. So if I'm in traffic, what The Secret would say is I must have imagined something bad happening. I must have imagined that, which of course is really weird to work backwards. But people find this book very attractive. And I think that in general, the power of positive thinking is very attractive. And the reason why I think is because it's fun to imagine yourself succeeding. It actually feeds into a lot of the types of biases that we have in decision making, which are sort of positive thinking biases, that we think we're more masters of our own destiny than we actually are, that we have more control over the way that things will turn out than we actually will. We tend to be overconfident, right? And also it's really good for like, it also plays into some of the confirmation bias that like we have these beliefs about ourselves or the world, and we like to think about the world in a way that confirms our beliefs. And I think that this all sort of plays into that idea of we can control our own destiny through the way that we're thinking. And then there's also the problem of when we imagine success, we get a lot of the kind of physiological good stuff that we get from succeeding, which is endorphins and that kind of good stuff. And when we imagine failure, we actually get a lot of those stress hormones being released. And so it kind of doesn't feel good. So that's kind of the background on why we want to be imagining not success, but failure, why we want to imagine success. And now I'll tell you why we want to imagine failure instead. So again, when I say imagining failure is a good thing, I don't mean imagining failing, imagining a bad or a negative goal is a good thing. You should have a positive destination. But here's the way that I put it is you could use a paper map, which is like the power of positive thinking. Like, there's my destination. And look, there's a clear route all along the way. I can just go along this road and I will get there fine. Or you can use Waze. And there's a reason why nobody uses paper maps anymore. And everybody uses Waze. And the reason is that Waze imagines all the ways that you're going to fail to get to your route. It imagines where the traffic is or where the obstacles are going to be, where there might be a speed trap, where there might have been an accident along the route. And by foreseeing those points of failure, it allows you to route yourself around them and figure out how can I actually avoid those points of failure. And this gets into what's actually much better than the power of positive thinking, which is mental contrasting. And there's a whole body of work by a woman named Gabrielle Oettingen, who's amazing, in the mental contrasting work, which is essentially just imagine a positive goal and then think about all the things that might go wrong, all the ways that you might fail. And then that will actually really drastically increase your chances of success. A simple example from her body of work that I think shows this really well is she took people who were in a weight loss program that needed to lose 50 pounds or more. And one group sort of did this positive thinking, like, I'm going to go to the gym every day and I'm going to be so great at that. I'm going to eat healthy. I'm going to make all my own meals on Sundays. And when I go to the restaurant, I'm not going to eat the bread. And all my friends are going to notice when I'm losing the weight. And then my love life is going to improve, and so on and so forth. So that's classic power of positive thinking. They're imagining all this amazing success. And then another group, she specifically instructed to imagine all the ways they might fail, right? What if I don't go to the gym? I'm going to go into the break room. There's me donuts and I know I'm going to end up eating them. My friends, how's it like? Maybe my friends aren't going to notice that I lose weight, or maybe my love life isn't going to actually improve when I lose this weight, so on and so forth. So they're imagining all of these obstacles. And what ends up happening is that the people who had the positive thinking, who did the positive thinking, lost on average 26 pounds less than the people who engaged in the negative thinking, in the mental contrasting work. And she's got a couple of ideas for why that is. One is that because you get these stress hormones, the stress hormones actually get you to act on your goals better. So they actually move you into action, which we want in order to succeed. But the other thing is you can imagine, just a simple preparation. If I know that there's a chance that I might fail to resist the break room donuts, now I can, first of all, try to figure out in advance, like, how could I actually avoid it? And second of all, if I do it, I've already thought about what that feeling is going to be and how I'm going to react to it in a way that's probably going to be more helpful and not cause me to completely lose sight of the goal altogether or to give up. So she's shown this across a variety of domains. I think that weight loss example is amazing, though.
It is fantastic. No, that's why I put down a bowl of ice cream if I'm watching Biggest Loser. Just because I know what it's going to do for me and my heart and my waistline. So one of the things you've touched on, and I picked it up in the book, I've seen it in some of your presentations, but it's really looking at how you look at hindsight and talk about it not being a 2020 vision, plus 2020 is a dirty word anyway, considering the year it's been. But
that's true. I never thought of that. That's so
it's
true.
A dirty word. Well, Friday the 13th was last week.
Yeah.
I don't know if Friday the 13th during 2020 is actually good luck. I don't know anymore.
I don't think anything particularly.
No, the markets were up. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? But
yeah,
less murder hornet news. I don't know. But one of the biggest things I think that I've heard you speak about, and I think this is tough for people, whether it's in life or in business, is really divorcing yourself, if you will, metaphorically speaking, from the emotion which plays such a part in your decision making. And I'm curious, because this is something that we all need to learn, but how do you really remove some of that so that you can make better decisions?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's such a deep topic.
Well,
So
as much as it is needed, it
yeah,
can also cause you to go the wrong way quickly.
yeah. So, oh gosh, there's so many different ways to go with this. So let me think about this. So we touched on it a little bit right now. So a lot of what happens is that in the wake of things going wrong, either because of luck or because you make a bad decision, we can go on something called tilt. This poker term, which basically is you get into an emotional state, which means that the decisions that you're going to make in the wake of that bad outcome are actually going to be compromised. So there's a lot where, people talk about the lizard brain or, the more primitive parts, the emotional centers, the limbic system, the amygdala. We hear a lot about that in terms of cable news, trying to get your amygdala. That's why we only ever see bad news on cable news. And when those emotional centers of your brain activate, the parts of your brain that are meant for rational thought, the prefrontal cortex, deactivates. And that's because there's an inhibitory relationship between the two. So this goes two ways. If I'm trying to do math problems, my emotions will tend to get tamped down. I mean, unless you get frustrated with the problem, but assuming that, like, I'm just giving you a sheet of problems that are doable for you, you'll tend to get your emotions tamped down. But then if I'm really emotional, I won't be able to do the math problems very well because it will actually cause the prefrontal cortex to kind of shut down. So basically what happens is that when we experience like bad outcomes, again, maybe because it was our own decision, like we did something stupid, or we just have bad luck or whatever, the emotional centers of our brain get lit up. That obviously shuts down the more rational parts of your brain, and then your decisions are going to be pretty bad after that. So that's the state that we call tilt. It derives from pinball machines. If anybody's tried to shake a pinball machine, it just shuts down.
It's
And so
an
that's
ancient artifact that Gen Z is not really familiar with.
right. Yeah. So a pinball machine is it was an actual machine, and you would put money into it, and then you would pull a lever, and there'd be a metal ball that would shoot out and would go through all these obstacles, and you would hit different things, and it would give you points. And then there were little flippers, and you'd hit the flippers, and that would cause the ball to not go into this hole where you would lose the ball, which is what you're trying to do. You're trying to keep the ball in play as long as possible, because every little thing that it hits, you score points, unless it goes into this little chute, and you have these flippers that allow you to stop it from going into the chute. And what a lot of people would do is sometimes when the ball was coming near something that they wanted to score points on, or getting near the actual flippers, they would shake the machine. And shaking the machine would cause the ball to sort of get away from the chute or to hit a target that they wanted it to hit. Okay. Now, obviously, the pinball makers knew this. And so if you shook the machine too much, it would shut down. Like literally the machine would just stop working. And then the ball would go into the hole and you'd kind of lose your game. Okay. So that's where
you feel old to describe that.
I do. I feel
like
very
a
old.
virtual reality. So virtual reality headset. Look it up on history. Whatever.
Something. Yeah. So anyway, so obviously what happens is that in trying to get this a little bit extra now, you're shaking up the machine, and then the whole thing shuts down. And that's basically what happens with tilt, is that the machine, in this case, your brain gets shaken up, and then the front part of your brain just shuts down. Gosh, now I really do. I'm feeling so old. But anyway, so this is what we're trying to avoid in decision making. So a little bit what I talked about with the mental contrasting work is some of the ways to avoid tilt, because a lot of what happens is, and I'm sure people have felt this, is that it's like that whole, like, why am I so unlucky? I can't believe this happened to me. That kind of stuff. Those are all really good sort of verbal signs of tilt, or those thoughts, right, are signs of tilt. And when you do mental contrasting, where you're sort of thinking ahead to the ways that things might go wrong, now what happens is that it turns less from, I can't believe this happened to me, I sort of knew this would happen to me, and I already have a plan in place. So that's number one. That's very helpful for that. So just sort of foreseeing the obstacles, preparing yourself for them. You can do signposting work so that you understand when that obstacle is approaching, so that you can get ready for it, having good plans in place for how I'm going to react to it. Like in the case of weight loss, for example, there's a very well documented effect in cognitive psychology, which is called the what the hell effect. And basically the what the hell effect is that we have all sorts of kind of natural resets. So you could think about them as like a year is a natural reset. So that's why people tend to make like New Year's resolutions. Obviously, you could make a resolution anytime during the year, but we tend to make them at the new year. Mondays would tend to be a reset, right? So, or Friday, depending it's on how you view the week, but some day in the week that's going to mark the week for you. Obviously, going to bed provides you with a reset. So we have these natural resets that occur. And basically what happens is that when we have some goal that we're trying to reach, that we're trying to execute on, and we know what the behaviors are that we should be engaging in order to reach that goal. If we do something that would cause us to lose ground from the goal, we will continue, we'll just say, what the hell, and we'll continue to do it until the next reset point. So the example would be, I've committed to eat healthy, and it's the morning, and I go into work and there's donuts, and I eat a donut. I'll tend to say, what the hell? And I'll just eat crappy for the whole day. Until I go to bed, or depending, right? It could be that I screw up on a Thursday and I say, what the hell? And then I keep doing that until the next Monday. Or it could be I make a New Year's resolution and then I mess it up and then I don't do anything about it until the next New Year, because it's going to depend on the time period. But that's what the what the hell effect is. We don't sort of say, well, it's fine that I ate a donut this morning, but like I still have new decisions to make for the rest of the day. And I need to think about it as all one long game, as opposed to a game that's built up of days or weeks or years. So that's a good example of tilt. That's basically going on tilt, like, screw it, I messed up. It doesn't matter. I'll try again another day.
Oh, it's a great analogy. I mean, I don't know of a diet or a goal for most people that doesn't have a certain day when they start over.
Mm-hmm.
And we do
exactly
all sort of things other than just when to eat ice cream and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, it's all sorts of things. Exactly. It's like, I'm going to get to work on time this week, and then you screw up one week, you're like, I'll try again next week. It's like, no, try again tomorrow. Right? Like, you don't have to give up for the week, but it depends on, what did you define the time period as, right? So, so that's a good example of tilt, where something happens, we screw up, and then our decision-making just goes completely awry. So if you do the mental contrasting work, you can think about that in advance, and you can say, if I eat the donut, what's my reaction to that going to be? Because I understand that that's a risk. Am I going to give up the whole day? Is that really good in terms of what my long-term goal is? Or am I going to say, okay, I messed up, but I still have lunch, right? I can do better at lunch. So that's one way is like sort of thinking in advance about these kinds of things, and then setting up what are called pre-commitment contracts. Like, when this thing happens, what will I do? And that's going to help you. So that's what that example is. Like, if I eat a donut, my reaction is going to be to do better at lunch.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my reaction will be. My reaction will not to be to wait till the next day or wait till the next week. Another thing that you can do is to get to a different time scale. So in the immediate wake, you're like, I ate the donut, screw it. But if you can stop for a second and just say, if I'm imagining that it's a week from now, am I going to be happy that I gave up this whole day? Is that a decision that I'm going to be proud of? The answer is almost invariably going to be no. And that's going to help you to then calm yourself down and to actually eat better for the rest of the day, because you're going to be thinking about some future version of yourself, looking back on this weird decision that you've made, that like, I messed up in the morning, so whatever, right? And it's going to actually see it more in the scope of time, which is what we're trying to get you to do. The other advantage of mental time travel is that you can't do it without engaging the prefrontal cortex, which goes back to that relationship between the prefrontal cortex and the emotional centers of your brain. And so then that will tend to calm your emotions down and get you into a better place. And you can imagine doing that a lot, just you get in an argument with your spouse and you say, in a week, am I going to regret having continued this argument? And the answer is like, yes.
Yeah. Two different things that you wrote about. I'm kind of curious. I'm going to package them together. Do you think that it's more of a problem to be stuck in sort of a paralysis analysis mode where people are scared to make a decision, or are they more afraid to look back on a decision constantly? And that can be, and then maybe that's what's driving them to not be able to make effective decisions.
Oh gosh. So actually those two things are the same problem. So I like that you sort of tied those together. So
put a bow on it then.
Yeah. So basically, I think that a lot of what causes us to get into this kind of analysis paralysis is that we're imagining the immediate wake of getting it wrong. And then that paralyzes us and causes us to not want to make a decision. So that's why they're actually kind of the same issue. So it's the imagining of the look back that actually causes us to not be effective on the going forward. So, and it has to do with kind of so there's a relationship between the time you take on a decision and the accuracy of the decision itself, right? So it's not a perfect relationship, but mostly if you take more time and you gather more information, mostly you'll make a more accurate decision. It's not always true, but it's like generally true. And so I think that we have this sense that if you go really fast, the risk of going pretty fast on a decision is that you're increasing the chances that you get an outcome that you don't like. Okay, so we kind of understand that little thing. But here's the issue is this, that when we're making decisions under uncertainty, there's always some chance that we're going to get an outcome we don't like. Now, yes, we can spend more time in order to reduce that, but that time is valuable and we're trading that off. And then a lot of times we get into these analysis modes where if we were really to step back from it and say, is the next piece of information that I get likely to actually change my mind at all? The answer is mostly no, right? Like if you're trying to decide about a European vacation or something, is the 70th review that you read on TripAdvisor really going to change anything substantial about the decision? The answer is probably no. So we get into these loops of trying to like sort of get it perfect. And I think the reason why is that when we get a bad outcome, we automatically think of it as a mistake. We automatically think, oh, if I had just chosen differently. So here's this very simple example of this. Everybody's had this. You're in a restaurant, you're trying to decide between two dishes, the chicken or the fish. And you decide I'm going to get the chicken. And then the chicken's really dry. And such a mistake. Why did I order the chicken? I should have ordered the fish. Well, but the problem is, of course, you can't know that. Like, I assume you haven't eaten those two dishes in that particular restaurant. And even if you had, you don't know how it's going to turn out on that particular day. And I don't know what it means to be a mistake there. Because it's like there's always some probability that the dish that you order is bad. It doesn't mean that you chose poorly. It just means, okay, you got a bad outcome. That happens. I've gone through green lights and gotten in accidents before. I don't really regret the decision. But we have this automatic feeling that's a mistake. That's the sort of way we label it. And then what is immediately goes through your head? Oh, if I should have asked the waitress or the waiter, right? I should have asked the wait staff. I should have asked other people what they thought. I should have read the Yelp reviews. If I'd only done more work, then I wouldn't have had this bad chicken. And that's obviously an inconsequential decision, but it happens to some very consequential decisions, right? Like you choose to spend time trying to close one client versus another, and then that client doesn't close, and you immediately are like, ugh, why did I spend all that time on them? I should have been spending it on this other person. Or you hire someone who you think is going to be a superstar, and then they turn out to be pretty bad, which, by the way, happens like 2/3 of the time. And then you're like, oh, it was such a mistake to hire that person. And, of course, it's like, it's not clear it was a mistake. I don't know what your decision process was, but mostly it's like they've never been in your company before. And there's all sorts of information that you don't know about them. And you don't really know whether they're going to be a good fit for you or not. And then stuff reveals itself to you after the fact. But that's that fear of I made a mistake as we look back, because we're so bad at figuring out what makes something a mistake or not, that causes the analysis paralysis in the first place, because we're trying to protect ourselves from that. We think if I just spend more time, then I won't get a bad outcome. Well, okay, that's not true. Mm-hmm. So it all kind of like, I don't know if I hope that made sense. Like it feeds completely in on itself.
It did completely. So, you've had such an amazing career. I mean, you've been a world poker champion. You almost won the Apprentice. A lot of people think you should have. Now you're doing so much. You started charitable organizations. You've written several books, including a great one. When you look back at your own career, I mean, this is sort of a cathartic experience when you write a book like this. What decisions, good or bad, did you kind of say, I wish I had understood this better in my career to help you move forward? Not necessarily career or life.
Yeah. I think about this a lot in terms of the decisions that I made about like what my major was in college, whether I should go directly to graduate school or not. I feel like a lot of those decisions were sort of like momentum and not understanding the idea of like exploring different options. Um, what, like, you know, I didn't take classes, a lot of class. I mean, well, so where I went to college, which was Columbia, you actually had to do a core curriculum. So that was causing like a pretty broad range across humanities. Um, but I didn't, I wish that I had explored things that were more in the sort of hard math, hard science, like finance, which I never did. Like I was just kind of like on this route. I was like an English and psychology major, and I kind of stuck down those paths, and I didn't really understand like how can you explore things? How would you actually think about what the future payoffs of these things are? My father was an English teacher. He wasn't very helpful in this way. He doesn't really think in systems in that way. So I wish I had thought about that. And then, graduate school seemed like sort of a low friction thing to do. I don't think I really, again, thought through like, what are the payoffs? What are my goals for a career? I just kind of thought like, oh, I want to be a teacher or researcher or something like that. I didn't really think about what the different options were.
But
And
you
then
did so well with probabilities. I mean, when you consider what you did in poker alone, I don't know how much better you could have done. You know what I mean?
Well, I always wonder. I think I may have ended up in graduate school anyway. It's that I don't feel like I had a lot of process behind it. That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
So, and then when I did actually end up in poker, honestly, people say to me, what was that decision like? And I said, it wasn't really one. I was sick and I needed to take a year off and I needed money. And then I happened to be very good at it and got really excited about it. I don't feel like it's until a couple years later that I started getting really intentional about my decisions and what I really wanted to be doing with my life. And I feel like my life got a lot better after I did that. But people weren't teaching this, and the people, one of the foundations that I co-founded is the Decision Education Foundation for exactly this reason. We don't teach it to kids in K through 12. I was never told like, here's how you would map it out. And here's how you think about like what the payoffs for a good decision process look like, or even what a good decision process is. So I feel like I ended up with some really good results, right? Like I'm very, very happy. I'm so happy that I have this, PhD level background in cognitive science and a very successful poker career under my belt that then informs all of my thinking about decision making. I'm happy I was an English major. It means that I can write well. All of those things I think ended up putting me into a really good place in life. But it wasn't until like I started thinking intentionally about the way that all of these things spoke together, kind of like as an after the fact, after I had these experiences. I'm not saying that I would have come to this would be a good thing to have happen, because a lot of things happen by exploration and kind of understanding how to leverage the things that are coming across your path. That is one thing that I'm naturally, I think, pretty good at, is that I sort of see opportunities come across my path, and I'm pretty good at like sort of pulling them into my orbit and thinking this is a really interesting branch to explore. Mm-hmm. I just wish that in college in particular, I had been more intentional about the branches that I was exploring.
It's easy when I think of you. It's for me, I know both the poker side, the retired poker player, and also the Apprentice. And I think most people, if they Google you, are going to think of a poker player. But I did watch the Apprentice a lot, and I'm kind of curious, for this stage where you are in your career. Apprentice was, it was the top rated show for quite a few years. Even coming in second, you helped elevate you from a well-known name to a household name that everybody knew, even if they didn't play poker. Have you seen it really continue to provide you a lot of opportunities to explore things like this that maybe poker did not?
So I think that it was certainly helpful in terms of, so what people didn't know is that for the last 10 years of my poker career, probably only about 20%, maybe less of my time was spent on poker. The rest of it was on consulting. Mm-hmm. In decision strategy, decision science, decision analysis, that kind of stuff, with companies, which ultimately ends up, you can see that obviously in thinking in bets and how to decide. It's really what I do with my clients is really working through this type of decision making. And obviously I've got the foundation too. So So I was mostly doing that, and that definitely helped. The Apprentice actually really helped that business. Um, and I'm, and I wonder, like, what, would Thinking in Bats been the book that it was if I didn't have the profile that was generated from that show? Like, I don't know. It's hard to run that counterfactual, but probably not. So, I mean, it definitely, raised my profile in a way that allowed, gave me more opportunity in terms of exploring the things that I really wanted to explore.
Well, and again, you talked about the consulting business being a part, and it's fascinating about celebrity is it allowed people to sort of frame you as a business thought leader other than just as a poker thought leader. Even if you were already working as a business thought leader, just to put a spotlight on it had to have helped.
Yeah.
So who are the kind of people that influence you in decision making and where you study? Who are the kind of, one of the people we talked about earlier that we both know is Seth Godin, who's brilliant, but who are those kind of people that really provide influence to you in helping?
Oh my gosh, I'm so lucky to have so many great people who are thought partners, mentors. So obviously Seth is one of them. Michael Mauboussin is such an amazing thought partner to me. He wrote a book called The Success Equation, Think Twice. He has a lot of amazing white papers. Everybody should go read his work. Danny Kahneman has been wonderful and helpful and really informs my work. One of my biggest mentors is Phil Tetlock and his wife Barb Mellers, who do the super forecasting work and group decision making work. And I work with them really closely, and they just provide me with such an amazing model for great scientists and great thinkers. Oh my gosh, it's like I feel like I'm gonna, lose so many people. I just had a great discussion with Ted Seides, who does Capital Allocator podcast, and he's been so incredibly generous and helpple.
This is like when somebody gets the Oscar and they have to think of the 50.
Oh my God. It's so many people. It's, I have to say, like, I've been very lucky. I feel like I'm very lucky because I have really, really smart people that I get to talk to. And, it's just, So, I mean, I left off like a ton of people, but there's some of them.
Yeah. Well, Annie, this is the tough part of the show where we get some good decisions that we're going to have you make. You're on a shark's perspective. My nickname is Shark. I swim with them as we discuss. What is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Well, oh gosh, the mechanical shark in Jaws.
Bruce. Yeah.
Because it didn't work, which made the movie like so much better. So that's why that's my favorite shark. Because if he had actually gotten his way, I don't think that movie would have been as good. Because it's like that you don't know the shark is just there, but it's not really. That was so great.
Way over budget, but Spielberg made it work. So Annie, it's a special time of my show when I ask the 5 most interesting and important questions you're going to ask today. All right, number 1, author/speaker or poker player?
Oh, our author/speaker.
Yeah, that's what I figured you'd say. All right, number 2. Iron Man or War Machine? You will understand.
What do you mean? What's the difference between the two?
Well, 2 different characters.
Oh, Iron Man versus War Machine. Oh, I got you. Oh gosh.
Which one do you prefer? And I'll tell you the backstory in a minute as to why.
I don't know War Machine. I only know Iron Man.
But you do know Don Cheadle, who played War Machine.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely War Machine then. I'm sorry. Yeah, for sure. Obviously. Yes.
No problem. Right. He wasn't in the first Iron Man, but he was.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, yeah, because Iron Man, he's too cocky. Like, he's brilliant, but he's not open-minded and he's too overconfident.
Agreed. Number 3, Texas Hold'em or Omaha?
Oh, Omaha for sure.
Okay. Number 4, and you've won both though.
Yeah.
Number 4, you're in Philly, New York Giants or Dallas Cowboys. This is sort of a lesser of 2 evils, I guess.
Like, what the hell?
Because Philly fans are tough and nasty. So I want to know.
I can't even. They're both awful.
It would be too much of a softball to say Phillies versus.
No, I get it. I guess I would just say New York Giants. Like, the Cowboys are just
the greatest team on the planet, except for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
All right. Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today, that's even been asked to Seth Godin: biscuits or cornbread?
Oh.
Finally.
Well, actually like a good biscuit for me.
Good lady. You spent a little time in the South, so
yeah, a good biscuit.
All right. Well, anywhere. I mean, obviously they got to go by this.
Is it sweet cornbread or regular cornbread?
Whatever you want.
I don't know. The crumble. I like the biscuits better anyway. The flaky.
Put some gravy on them.
Yeah.
All right. So this is an excellent book, How to Decide. But where do you want people to find out more about you, your consulting business, and more?
Thank you for that. So 2 places. One is AnnieDuke.com, which is my website, and you can find out anything there. It's like you can see videos of my speaking. There's a newsletter. There's a contact form, and actually I try to respond to everybody who writes in. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm probably 90% to respond to you. And if I don't respond to you, it's not because I didn't like your note. It's just like I get buried under stuff sometimes. Otherwise, I do try to shoot for 100%. And you can find all my books there. So AnnieDuke.com is a great place. If you want to like see the personal me, Twitter is where I'm very active there. My LinkedIn is more anodyne. Although you can link with me there, but you're not really going to be linking with like me. Twitter is the place where you're going to get that from me. So, and that's at Annie Duke on Twitter. So those would be the 2 best places to get me.
Annie, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
This was so fun. Thank you so much, Shark.
So there was my conversation with Annie Duke, the best-selling author, speaker, consultant, former professional poker player and World Series of Poker Tournament of Champions winner, runner-up on NBC's Celebrity Apprentice, a National Science Foundation Fellowship awardee, a nonprofit founder, and now she's the author of How to Decide, Simple Tools for Making Better Choices. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with her. First, love her point when she said, I don't think we spend enough time as individuals really thinking in an intentional way about what is the quality of our decisions. What should we learn from past decisions that we've made and how they turn out? How can we make better decisions going forward? Because that's the only thing that's going to make your life better. Such a great point. She believes 2 things that influence your life: luck and the quality of decisions you make. It's luck plus decisions. Personally, I really do believe that God has much to do with it and how he's guided me, but nonetheless, her point is very true. None of us really look in detail like we should, and that doesn't mean to overthink it, but as a challenge, take a few minutes and really look at how you consider your own personal decision-making process. Second, love the example in paper maps versus Waze. I'm not sure if Vespucci imagined his work later becoming an app, but how do you look at your upcoming decisions? Sometimes, and hopefully more often than not, you're using the right and informed data to make your best decisions. But it does matter to some degree how you're imagining success or failure. Think I've ever come across a shark in the wild and spent any time picturing myself failing? No, not an option for me. So as she goes on to later point out, though, hindsight is not 20/20. Oftentimes you've got to divorce yourself first from emotion in decision making, and that's so hard for many people to do. Third, love it when she said, when we get a bad outcome, we automatically think of it as a mistake. She used the ordering chicken or fish in a restaurant as an example. You've never eaten in that restaurant before. You may get a bad outcome. You may get chicken that's too dry, but we often only label it as a mistake. For so many, they lock themselves into the fear that contributes to the paralysis in that thinking, and that often can become the bigger mistake to consider. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. So it was an easy decision today, and I hope you'll decide again to join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.